Writing a song can be really hard to start. You may find yourself staring blankly at your notebook, screaming internally because you can't rack your brain on where to start. Last summer, I offered an in-person songwriting summer course that went over all of the aspects of songwriting. And by the end, my students were able to both write a song and feel confident about it. This year, I've decided to share this course on YouTube for all to have. So in this upcoming songwriting series, we're going to go over all of the important steps and aspects required to write your next Billboard ranking song. For those of you who don't know, I write music for the Denver-based indie band Blue Lagoon. We've released 2 albums and been on tour a couple of times. On top of that, I've written a few classical compositions during my undergrad. You could say that my songwriting experience ranges, but for this particular series, we're going to focus on non-classical style of songwriting. So the first thing we're going to talk about is song form. The important thing to note is that no one song form is used universally. Some are used more often than others, but there is more than one type that you can use. Today we're going to talk about the most common song form that songwriters use. And that looks like this. Intro, verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, outro. I kind of want to break this down and think of song form as a style of storytelling. Let's start with the introduction. The introduction is often only music. It lays out the musical scene or the story that we're going to tell. Is it going to feel like a sad song? If so, we might be in a minor key and it might be a little bit slower. Is it going to be an angry song, so maybe it's more upbeat and the drums are really loud? Introductions, while beneficial to the telling of a story, is not required. Many songs don't use introductions and jump right in. But even in a storytelling context, we can still do without introductions. Take, for instance, Star Wars. Our introduction to the franchise in the first movie is completely an action scene. There's hardly really any sort of, this is this character, this is this character. We kind of just figure it out along the way. Now, the next part of our story that we're going to talk about is a verse. Verses, like story form, provide our initial conflict or subject. They explain why we are writing the song in the first place. Take Nirvana's Lithium. Kurt Cobain begins with the verse, "I'm so happy because today I found my friends. They're in my head. I'm so ugly, but it's okay, because so are you." Just from the first couple of lines, we already know part of the story. The narrator, whether Kurt or somebody else, is feeling existential and his reality is starting to warp. The next element is chorus. The chorus can act as numerous story form devices. The first option is that it can be used as the climax for both the story and the music. It's here where the music may rise in volume and emotion, as may the words and the verbiage. The second option is that it may be used as a resolution, even though the song hasn't ended or will just keep going. I like to think of it as wrapping all of my feelings into a couple of sentences. And I will continue to elaborate on those feelings later in later verses, but again, just kind of clumping everything into a couple of sentences, and that is the chorus. Another example of this is Still Into You by Paramore. Hayley Williams describes her initial feelings in the verse, but then wraps it all up by saying that despite all of this, she's still into this person. For me, the verses and the choruses are essential to the song. Other things that work in a song but are not required are pre-choruses and bridges. Self-explanative pre-choruses appear before the chorus. They represent a transition that can both be heard in the music and the words. For example, Chappell Roan's Good Luck Babe has a pre-chorus. In between the verse and the chorus, she sings, "I don't want to call it off, but you don't want to call it love. You only want to be the one that I call baby." It's a brief moment of reflection before she really lets her emotions soar in the chorus. Now, bridges are another moment of reflection and tension, but they take up the time of a verse. I kind of like to think of this moment as like a "but what if?" Continuing to use Good Luck Babe as an example, Chappell Roan goes on to write a bridge that represent this "but what if" moment. What if you move on and regret everything? Staying up at night thinking about me. And another thing to note is that we can also hear this tension in the music when it goes to a minor chord instead of major. Similar to intros, outros are not required, but they do signify the end of a story. Some see it as a cheesy "the end" text that you get at the end of fairy tales. Others see it more like punctuation. But in the end, it's up to you and if you want to use it. That about wraps up my teachings on song form. Remember that songwriting is subjective. There's no one right way to do it. But if you're feeling super lost, this may be a good place to start. Stay tuned for next week when I'll talk about lyricism. See you then.